Hey y'all, I'm Emily, an almost lifelong quilter with a lot of stories to tell. I have loved quilts and talking about them for as long as I can remember, and I'm here to celebrate the tradition of quilting with you. From family heirlooms to thrift store finds, every quilt holds a piece of history and a little piece of a quilter's heart. Join me every other week to get back to your quilting roots. We'll celebrate quilts and the real people who made them, learn a little bit about the history of quilting, and have lots of fun exploring ways to reclaim tradition in a modern world. I'm so glad you're joining me this week here at Patchwork Revival. Hey friends, I am Emily. Welcome to the Patchwork Revival podcast, the podcast that celebrates the connection we find in the quilts we love. Welcome to episode 18. I am here in my office, my studio. I'm in the middle of a move. Things are a little bit crazy right now, but I really wanted to pop out here and record a quick episode talking to you guys about the documentary called The Quilters that started streaming on Netflix this May 16th to be exact. I had it marked in my calendar, so I vividly remember the date. It's a really, really fascinating documentary. We'll dive into it in this episode because it really struck a chord with me. And I know it struck a chord with a lot of other quilters and makers in the quilting community. So I wanted to share my thoughts on it and I want to hear your thoughts on it. So leave a comment, send me a message. As always, remember the best way to send me a message right now is at Instagram on my account at Patchwork Revival Studios. I'll check those messages. I'd love to hear from you, get your ideas, and get your thoughts on the documentary called The Quilters. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder that the best way to share the show and to support the show is just to leave a review, rate the show, follow the show. I'm tracking my downloads. We're going up every week. I'm really excited about it because I really hope that means that y'all are loving the podcast as much as I'm enjoying making it. Sometimes it kind of sneaks up on me and I think, oh my goodness, I haven't released an episode or recorded or started editing the episode for this week. So I'm keeping up a good pace so far this year. I've been able to do every other week pretty regularly, and so I'm really excited about that. I hope you guys are enjoying it. Remember, hop down, rate the show, review, like, subscribe, share with a friend. I'm really glad you're here. So without further ado, let's jump into my take on The Quilters, the documentary on Netflix. Some quick background. So this is a short documentary. It's about 33 minutes. You can stream it on Netflix. It is directed by a woman named Jenifer McShane. She's an independent filmmaker. She sort of came up with this story, began filming it herself. It is not her first documentary. There's an episode actually of the Quilter on Fire podcast where the host, Brandy, actually interviews Jenifer and gets her sort of story on how she came up with the idea, how she executed her plan, how she sort of even talks about her creative process as a filmmaker and a storyteller. It's really fascinating. I really recommend listening to that as well. It's very well done, and so I'm not going to rehash any of that stuff because that's why Brandy made the podcast, for other people to enjoy and listen to and to build off of, I'm sure. And so my goal today with sharing my sort of honest review and my take of the documentary is just to start conversation, to encourage you to go watch it, and just to, like I say, engage in conversation and community around this awesome show. I think it's really amazing. So to be more specific, the documentary centers around a correctional facility. It's a maximum security prison in Licking, Missouri. And I'm going to link actually an article from Quilting Daily. It's online and it shares just a little bit of this background information. So if you want to go reference that, you can. As a part of this prison's restorative justice program, one of the programs there is a quilting group that the incarcerated men can join. The group makes quilts specifically for foster children in all of the neighboring counties. They have these foster kids' birthdays and initials. They don't have the full names, and I'm not sure if they have color preferences or anything like that. I don't think that they do. I think all they have is a birthday and then initials. And these inmates get together and they quilt every day from, I think it said like 7:30 to 3:30, 5 days a week. And the documentary sort of covers the group as a whole and then certain members of the group who are working on particular projects, sharing their process, sharing their work, things like that. So it's a really, really interesting look into what life is like for some of these people who have been in prison. Some have life sentences, some have, a couple decades sentence, some are looking at possibly getting out in the next couple of years. Some are recognizing that they will never be out of prison and this is their life, and they're sort of coming to terms with how they can give back to the community, even from inside a correctional facility. So there's a lot of different layers to explore, and a lot of different layers that I took away as a quilter. And I know that everybody will kind of pick up on different things depending on their experiences, their background, sort of what they're feeling at the time, what they're making at the time. But I really loved a lot of the show, and I picked up on a few things that I wanted to share with you that I really enjoyed and want to hear some thoughts about. So again, I'm going to link the article to the Quilting Daily article. It has links to the restorative justice program, so you can kind of read about it, see what it is. They have actually all sorts of programs I looked at. This is through the state of Missouri, but they have people who make programs where they make toys for children. They have a community garden, and they can sell the produce to neighboring communities or maybe donate it. I'm not sure, obviously, but that's something I may have spoken out of turn about. But it's really fascinating, and I love that quilting became part of this and really sort of validated quilting as a way to give back to a community. I believe I saw a statistic at the end of the documentary. They have credits that kind of roll up. And to this point, it said that over 2,000 quilts have been donated to foster children. So that's pretty incredible. When you see the documentary, what you'll notice is that it's a really small space that this whole group is working in. But they do a lot of work. It's really, really cool. So the first thing that stuck out to me in the film was the actual sort of sheer diversity of the group that the film chronicles. First off, I found it really fascinating to approach quilting from this way. The group is all men. It's a men's correctional facility. And when you think of a quilting group or a bunch of quilters getting together to make quilts, charity quilts for foster kids, I would argue that most people are not picturing incarcerated men on either of those demographics, much less together. So that was really fascinating to me. I have seen programs in the past on probably different specials, and I've Googled, I couldn't find it, but I've heard of these prison quilting programs. I've even talked to a local lady who I think she was involved in going to maybe Angola prison in Louisiana for a sort of quilting initiative to bring to the prisoners at that time. But I found that it was really a cool way to approach the art of quilting, and the fact that it approached a quilting practice from the perspective of men who were serving sentences for committing crimes. Too often, I think we just pigeonhole people into, quilting is a little old lady hobby, or quilting is a trad wife hobby. And really, quilting is for everyone. And I loved that this documentary chronicled that just simply from the get-go, just simply by the subject matter. Quilting is for everyone. And I don't think there's any better way to show it than through this documentary, The Quilters. There are men of all different ages, men of all different backgrounds. Some had grown up around sewing. Some had grown up working in, for example, an upholstery shop. We're used to working with leather or things like that, and really had to adjust to getting used to finer, like quilting fabrics and working with machines that, were not industrial machines. Some people had never touched a machine, didn't know anything, but there was an inmate there named Ricky that the story really closely follows, and sort of projects him and portrays him as almost the leader of this group of quilters. He taught other quilters. He'd be the one showing them how to work the machine. This is how you service the machine. This is how you would put this together. This is how you match these points. Nope, I can't pass this quilt. There's a pucker here and there in it. And this is something someone's going to have for a really long time. So it has to be just right. And there are people who create quilts based on patterns. There are people who make quilts based literally on their wildest imagination. And I found that really relatable, because I know when I look at my quilting circle, that's exactly what I experience. I interact with people of all different ages, all different backgrounds, all different skill abilities, all different styles and aesthetics. And I love that at the end of the day, we're so different, but we're all making a quilt and kind of speaking the same language as far as that goes. So that was a really kind of poignant, just right from the get-go, you just immediately notice, wow, this is not exactly what I pictured when I thought of quilters. This is not exactly how I quilt. This is very different than my style or my color choice or how I would do it or my practice. But man, it was so cool to see how each of these characters' personalities, I mean, they're real people, but they really worked to show their personality and their character and their tastes and their style by speaking to them and interviewing them, but also by showcasing their work and their quilts. And I thought that was a really powerful way to just sort of talk about that and express that and explain that, especially because this is a documentary that I think will speak to many, many people, not just people who are quilters or who understand quilting as the art form that it is. The second thing that I just absolutely loved about the documentary is that as it introduces some of our main characters in the story, it really explicitly describes and explains how quilting for them, first off, is an absolute privilege. And I think that sometimes we forget that we are able to have this hobby that can sometimes be expensive or sometimes take up time that we don't have, or I don't know, just all the things. But in this program, they literally have to earn the privilege to quilt, to join the quilters. They can't have any write-ups, they can't have any violations. And it felt like quilting was something that they could be really proud of and really protective of, because it was a way to kind of move out of their normal circle. So one of the main characters is named Chill, Mr. White. Chill is what he went by. And he said, whenever I'm down here, and this was in his kind of cell block, he was like, whenever I'm down here, it's a jungle. I have to be tough. I have to be rough around the edges so I don't get eaten alive and that kind of thing. And then when he walked up, they kept saying go up. So I'm imagining the quilting room is upstairs. He said, when I come up here, I walk through those doors and everything changes. I can just be myself. I really love all these people I'm around. We work together, we get along, and this is how I get out. It's how I feel outside. And how many of us can relate to that? Because that's exactly what quilting is for me. And of course, I don't always live a life where I have to be physically tough, but I, have a relatively stressful job. And a lot of times I have to be strong or a leader in my sort of professional environment. I can't let weakness show. I have to be confident and calm and collected, whether there's a crisis or something of that sort. But you know what? Quilting is where I can come and just shed all of that. And I know that for many, many of us, that's the case. And isn't it fascinating that that is also the case for a man who is serving a prison sentence for a crime? The last episode that released was episode 17 with Marissa of The Surgical Sewist, and we talked a lot about sort of the mental maintenance and the mental well-being that can come from creativity and sewing specifically. And I just have to imagine that if, I was sitting in a situation where I was almost daily, probably hourly, maybe by the minute, just confronted with, here I am because of one of these, a horrible thing that I did in my life, and I accept accountability, but I really regret it, and I just can't sit and live with that forever. Man, what an awesome and incredible escape quilting could be. So they were really able to convey that and verbalize that in a really powerful, really special way that I just really enjoyed hearing, and I really enjoyed sort of seeing the transformation. These guys, so many of them, you could tell were just in that flow state where you just sit at your machine and you just crank through a project that you're working on. And while you're working, you're thinking about maybe nothing. Maybe you're thinking about the person you're creating the quilt for. Maybe you're not in a good mood and you're just trying to get things done with your hands to keep your mind off things. And I really loved that. I felt like it was really a great depiction of how we quilters, all of us, really just let go and can really process and relax and find ourselves through our work. Of course, since this is the Patchwork Revival podcast, what I always look for in everybody's story is a legacy story, because what I love the most about quilting is almost that historical aspect of how it's been passed on from generation to generation, and how it really truly connects us on all different levels, from our ancestors to our legacy that we'll be leaving behind through our quilts and our work and our knowledge that we share with people. And one of my favorite parts was when Ricky, who I mentioned was almost like the leader of the sewing room. He's the one who taught people how to quilt. He encouraged them. If somebody was like, oh, I don't know what this is messing up, he would come over, kind of try to help, give advice, all kinds of things like that. But Ricky talked a lot about how his mother and grandmother were sewists, how they, were always making clothes or patching things or making quilts from old clothes as he grew up. So he knew what quilting was. He had this picture of it. And it's pretty amazing that there he was. In the story, it talks about how he was incarcerated as a very, very, very young man, and he was actually serving a life sentence. So he was one who said, I'm never getting out of here. But while I'm here, this is how, I'm making a difference or giving back to my community or learning to forgive myself. I mean, so many things that came into the story. And he was really just reflecting on how he had a vision and an idea of what quilting was from his mother, who learned it from his grandmother. And then to just see all of that knowledge that he had from them, and then all of the knowledge that he had developed over the years from his experience working in the quilting room, and then passing it on to others who he taught. Over 40 years, he had been there 40 years. I'm not sure how long the quilting had been going on, but quite a while, or at least enough to make a lot of quilts. And it was just a really, really cool way to see that legacy being passed on to other people in real time. Because when we teach someone to sew, that's literally what we're doing. And when we explain how to do something in quilting, or how we did this or how we did that, we're passing on our knowledge to the next generation. And that is so important. It's so, so important. That's how we today even know how to quilt, because our grandmothers and great grandmothers and grandpas, uncles, great uncles taught each other, and it all got passed on to us. And now here we are. We are the stewards of this knowledge and this information, and we get to pass it on to other people. Another sort of legacy moment that I really loved was when one of the quilters was talking about his choice of fabrics. He loved butterflies. This was chill. He loved butterflies. Basically, every quilt he made incorporated some kind of butterfly. And he said he chose that because of his mother. His mother loved butterflies, he said. And so he chose butterflies. And he was describing, as he was quilting, kind of being interviewed at his sewing machine. He was talking about how he would just reflect on her words, her encouragement to, do better, be more patient, kind of hearing her love and her care for him kind of mentally in his head as he was working. And I love that. That's so special, because I know for me, when I quilt, I feel like I'm with my mama. She's, long passed away, going on, almost 5 years now. And even to this day, I feel like I'm with her when I'm quilting. And that's really special. So always remember that, I always think of that whenever I am making a quilt for someone, or talking about quilting with someone, or teaching someone to quilt, or imagining one day my kids will want to learn how to quilt and I'll be able to teach them. It's a really powerful way to love somebody, to remember somebody, and I love how it was portrayed in the show. And that is really awesome. So I loved that part of the story. It was kind of a thread that just wove through the whole story, and that was awesome. The other thing that really stuck out to me was a couple of sort of like real life moments where they're talking to these guys, or just kind of filming almost B-roll or kind of candid footage. There's someone who sews an entire block. I mean, y'all, this was a big block, like strip pieced, lots of seams. And he sewed it all completely like inverted, just completely the wrong way. Oh my gosh, we've all done this and had that just pit in our stomach. Like I just did the whole thing wrong. So it was a very relatable moment when, if you're actually a sewist or a quilter and you've done that before, you just know, oh my gosh, you just felt for the guy so badly. And then, he goes over, he realizes his mistake, just cursing at his machine, seam ripping. And we've all been there. And I actually really loved that relatability. There's another portion where, another kind of clip where they have a huge quilt and it's getting put on the long arm machine. They actually have a long arm machine, which is how they're able to finish the quilts. And the drama happens because they say it's messing up. So it kind of seems as though the machine is messing up. Or maybe something's not quite right, but yeah, it's messing up. And I just thought about all these times that I'm sitting here at my desk and you've heard me talk about my machine. Her name is Sassafaf. She sits right here next to me on my little studio set. And you know what? She gets a lot of blame for my mistakes. And I just have to say, I'm glad to know that it's not just me that blames my equipment when it goes wrong. They fixed the problem. They got it all fixed up. But it was just a really funny moment for me to kind of realize, like, I was just laughing so hard at that because we've all been there. We've all done it. Another thing that I found really, really funny was there was a man who was sort of like in charge of the room where tools were kept and where the fabric or material room was. And everything that these men make is from donated materials. So donated batting, fabric, thread, tools. I mean, I'm sure all of it donated. And when you look at that room, it is like floor to ceiling metal shelving, just stuffed full of fabric. And it's all folded very neatly, very nicely, stacked, but sometimes kind of had to be crammed in there. Like we all have fabric stashes like that, or at least I do. Let's be real. I don't have some super aesthetic fabric stash. I just don't. But I know where every single thing is. And let me tell you, this guy knew where everything was. Like the guys, the quilters in the room would come in, and if they had a design idea or needed something, they would say, I want a thing with, not burgundy, red. I need red. And he would go exactly to this stack and pick exactly, he just knew where everything was. It was complete organized chaos. It was fabulous. I loved seeing that. It was just like these real moments that we've all experienced as quilters. And it just sort of really hit the point home that quilting is such a transcendent art form. It's such a transcendent sort of medium. Like, we can relate on so many levels just based on the fact that we've made a quilt. Okay. The other thing, and this kind of ties back to the donations. This program is all run on materials that are donated. These guys are donating their time. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. They're making quilts that are going to be donated to foster children. And I think that was the final point to me that was just so special about watching the film, is how just blatantly and obviously generosity was just permeating this whole story. And you all know, if you've listened to the podcast, at all, any episode, I hope, to reflect how important I believe community is for us as people, but particularly as quilters, and cultivating community, nourishing community, nurturing community is part of how we preserve our art form and pass our knowledge on to next generations of quilters. And I just loved how connected I felt to these men that I had never met before. I will probably never meet them. They will never know who I am. But I have felt really moved by watching this documentary because we all approach quilting from different perspectives, but at the end of the day, really what we're doing is such an act of love and generosity. We're creating warmth for people. We're creating comfort. Even if that's for ourselves, that's fine. If you keep every quilt you make, that's fine. It's not about giving things away, but it is about a generosity of heart and of spirit. And the film captured that so well, how just actually generous and giving these men were of their hearts. Maybe they're not all like that, but the ones that were really chronicled and followed in the program were just, they were quilters. There's no other way to say it. They were quilters, just like we are. And I loved seeing that. And I love that it was portrayed to the world through this documentary. Some of my favorite part of the show of watching the film was when Chill was making a quilt. And he said, I love taking care of these foster kids. And another character, his name was Jimmy, basically said it was a way that they, meaning the quilting group, a way that they as people were able to tell someone that may not have ever even heard it from anyone in their whole life, hey, we care about you. There was a point where they were reading, a note from the community just saying thank you for your work. And I mean, so many of these people just got choked up. These men, these grown men were like choked up, tearing up. And I just loved that was portrayed the way it was portrayed because, this whole world can be a pretty hard, pretty scary, a pretty confusing, a pretty frightening place, just depending where you are, what day it is, what you've experienced, what all's going on. But quilts are medicine. They're comforting, they're healing. Whether you're making a quilt, receiving a quilt, making a film about a quilt, it just was a way for these guys to feel as though they could redeem a small part of something in themselves, in their community. And it really challenged me to think about that in my own sort of practice. And I don't know, I'm still sort of working through that. I'm still processing that. But I always try to advocate for generosity of time, of heart, of spirit, financially, if you can do it. Not everybody can. So there's so many ways to be generous and there's so many ways to be welcoming, but that's how we create community and that's how we enjoy being a part of a community. And I would argue that the quilting community is one of the best communities to be a part of. And I know I'm super proud to be a quilter. I've always been proud to be a quilter, but watching this documentary really, really, really struck my heart and made me realize, man, quilting is so cool. And I love that it was showcased in a way that most quilters are never going to experience. I love that it gives us kind of a fresh idea, a fresh way to imagine quilting groups. I really hope that you'll tune into it. You can stream it on Netflix. Again, it's called The Quilters, and it is directed by Jenifer McShane. So check it out if you have a chance. It's totally worth the 30 minutes. A final thought that I wanted to leave us all with was one of the quotes that one of the men said. At this moment, I can't even remember who said it at this point, but it was kind of a common theme of the whole documentary, and it was, we're not perfect, but we're all just trying to do better. And I loved that, because that's literally what quilting is a metaphor for. In all of my quilt patterns that I write, I try to mention, at the Patchwork Revival, it's not about perfection. It's about the process of creating a quilt and honing in on our skills, remembering who we're making a quilt for, why we're quilting, why we love it, how we're passing it on to other people. And it's truly a love language. And it's also a way that we can really love ourselves by just allowing ourselves to understand we really don't have to be perfect. If you try to be perfect, that's great. But you know what? You're going to fail every time, because perfection just really doesn't exist. And I just feel like that is a really valuable lesson to carry with us as we continue quilting, as we live our lives. And that's it. That's sort of the last thought that I have. If you've watched The Quilters on Netflix, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought of it. If you know of any other ways to get involved with quilting initiatives in the community, whether it's through a correctional facility or children's program, something like that, drop a comment below or send me a message, because I'd love to hear about it. I will leave links in the show notes. Again, just reminding you, there is an episode of Quilts Are on Fire interviewing the director of the film, Jenifer McShane. There's an article where you can read more about a restorative justice program through the Missouri Department of Corrections. There's also a small interview and just sort of some background information on the documentary in that article. I really hope that you'll take the time to watch it. It's a great way to sit and do some hand sewing, some hand binding, work on your label for your quilt, and check out The Quilters, streaming now on Netflix. That's all I've got for today. It's a little bit of a shorter episode, but I hope you loved it. Hope you enjoy it. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. I should be through my move by then, so I'm really hoping that I'll have myself together and not be dashing out here to put these episodes together. But I'm enjoying the podcast. I hope you are too. I hope that you'll share it with a friend. That's it for this week on the Patchwork Revival. Bye, y'all. Well, that's it for this episode of Patchwork Revival. I loved having you here with me talking all things quilty. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave a rave review. Also, be sure to jump down to the show notes to find links for this episode, as well as the link to my shop where you can enjoy 15% off as a podcast listener with code REVIVAL. Remember that the Patchwork Revival podcast is here to celebrate the connection made in the quilts we love. I'll see you next time.